Sudhismritipurananam alayam karunalayam namami bhagavad-padam shankaram lokashankaram Om sthavagaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupini avatara varishtaya ramakrishnaya te namaha. Let us meditate in the depth of our hearts on the supreme omniscient reality present in all of us. Om peace, peace, peace. So today's topic is again Vedanta Philosophy, the fourth in the series. So at the very beginning I explained why we chose this Vedanta Philosophy for a topic in these discussions. First of all, the one reason is when you walk in the street, the first word that you read come across is Vedanta. And this Vedanta philosophy was brought to this country. It was given a very scientific, rational interpretation and exposition by Swami Vivekananda in modern times. And when Vivekananda came here, he found religion itself was facing a great challenge. The humanists, mostly radical humanists, were influenced by the teachings of Marx and Engels, and also evolutionists who were inspired by the new discoveries, theories of evolution by Charles Darwin, and neo-positivists. So all of them had started challenging the claims of traditional religious theology. And then Vivekananda came to this country around that time and exposed a religious philosophy which is universal, which is the religious philosophy of the whole mankind, not of a particular nation, a culture, or a race, or a people, but it belongs to the whole humanity. It's our common spiritual heritage. As I mentioned in the previous sessions, it was Shankaracharya, the great philosopher saint of India, who lived from 778 AD to 810, only 32 years he lived. It was the Shankaracharya who really formed Vedanta, ideal Vedanta concept into a concrete, a compact metaphysical structure. Before Shankaracharya, Vedantic ideas, what we today call Vedantic ideas, existed only as some concepts, ideas. But they had not formed into a compact philosophical superstructure. So Shankaracharya wrote commentaries on the essence of Vedic literature called Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, which is again an ancient exposition of Upanishadic philosophy in the teachings of Lord Krishna in the 3rd millennium BC, rather 4th millennium BC, and also Brahma Sutras. So these are the triple foundations of Vedanta philosophy. Now today, if you read any of the traditional interpretations or translations of Vedantic texts into modern English, one serious problem that you confront, one serious criticism of Vedanta philosophy is that it is opposed to the realities of life in this world, that it is opposed to the idea of work, action, and also it is neutral in its approach to the principles of morality. These are the 3 criticisms you come across against Vedanta, mostly due to some deep-rooted misunderstandings. Because those who had no access to the original works of Shankaracharya, which are in classical Sanskrit, have a very serious problem. It's not their fault. Say, if I read Meister Eckhart today, I don't know old French, old German. He lived in the 13th century, 12th, 13th century in Germany. He wrote an old German, which I don't know. So I have to depend upon maybe the interpretations of Rudolf Otto. Or if I want to read the works of Plato, Aristotle, or Socrates, I have to depend upon English translations. Even if I have to read the greatest creative fiction, Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov, I have to depend upon translations, Constant Garner's translation, supposed to be the best. Now the problem is, translation is a much bigger problem in philosophy than in creative writing. In translations, philosophical ideas not only get distorted, but they start standing on their heads, what we call Sishasana, the headstand in Hatha Yoga. So as a result of this phenomenon, which is common in all philosophical literature, there are some very, very common misunderstandings, misrepresentations with regard to Vedanta philosophy. I have already dealt with one problem, the Vedantic concept of the relativity of the empirical world, empirical phenomena, which was what we dealt with in the last 2 sessions, in the last 2 lectures, the 2nd and 3rd series. The Vedantic concept of relativity of the empirical world, which is as scientific as philosophical, as Vedantic. Every primary student of physics will tell you that this world is not permanent in the sense it remains unchanging for millions of years. Nobody will believe it if you tell them the world remains unchanging for millions of years. So that's as scientific, as acceptable to modern physicists as to Vedanta philosophers. Now coming to this problem of karma or action. So if you read many of the translations, one big problem arises. And the problem is, Vedanta is amoral, means it doesn't emphasize the principles of morality. It is the worst possible criticism that you can level against Vedanta. In fact, Vedanta philosophy was expounded by Swami Vivekananda in 19th century as the most universal and rational foundation of ethics. There is a statement, the infinite oneness of the soul is the eternal sanction of all morality, all ethics, all good actions. You do not hurt your neighbor, not because God will punish you, because your neighbor and yourself are the same. Vivekananda's words in Inspired Talks. You cannot hurt anyone. You cannot do harm to anybody in this world, because other person whom you consider to be the other person is spiritually a part of your own self. If you hurt others, you're hurting yourself. If you do harm to others, you're doing harm to yourself. Shankaracharya, writing on this principle, Vivekananda expounded in modern language in the 19th century, says, there is a verse in the Gaudapada Karika, I shall quote and then I shall explain. There is a reason why I am forced to quote these original Sanskrit verses. Two reasons. One reason is it is impossible for me to speak on Vedanta without quoting. It is a psychological handicap. Second reason is there is a tradition in Vedanta metaphysics. You should not give your own idea as it is falling from the air. You should substantiate your idea with relevant quotations from the original sources. There is a central principle in Vedanta metaphysics. Padavakya pramana sahidam likhyadam. This is a statement. Means when you make a statement in Vedanta, you cannot just say as if it is yours. It is part of a traditional spiritual succession of teachers and students. These great Vedantic ideas were not invented by a great saint or a philosopher. Like Newton, of course he discovered, did not invent. But you can invent a machine, but you cannot invent a scientific theory because scientific theory pre-exists even before you discover it. You can invent a machine, but you cannot invent the theory of relativity or gravitation because gravitation existed before Newton was born and would have existed even if he was never born. So Vedantic ideas were discovered through inner introspection, which we science call tapasya. Spiritual practices, long years of inner meditation, practice of the highest spiritual, ethical principles, looking upon the whole creation as non-different, non-distinct from yourself, by the practice of non-violence, truthfulness, complete freedom from greed, all these great spiritual qualities, if you practice and then meditate, you can discover this Vedantic truth of universal spiritual unity and oneness within your heart. So, these great truths were discovered by great saints, and Shankaracharya wrote in book form, that's why. So, he says in a commentary on Gaudapada Karika. Gaudapada Karika is a metrical work of 215 verses on Mandukya Upanishad. It's called Mandukya Karika. Karika means a commentary in verse. That's what it means. So, Siddhanta Vyavasthasu Dvaitino Nischida Dridam Parasparam Virudhyante Taihi Ayam Na Virudhyade. This is in Gaudapada's Karika. The meaning is, those who quarrel among themselves think that their doctrine alone is true and all others are wrong. But the non-dualist Vedantins believe in the spiritual oneness of creation and existence. Therefore, they cannot quarrel with anyone, because by quarreling with others, they'll be quarreling with themselves. So, Asmadyoyam Vaidigo Dharma Na Viruddhide. That's what Shankaracharya says. And Parasparam Anyona Virodhibhihi Asmadyoyam Vaidigo Dharma Na Viruddhide. Means those who quarrel among themselves, we have no quarrel. Because by quarreling with others, we are quarreling with ourselves, because spiritually, humanity is one, existence is one, the society is one. So then Shankaracharya says, Yada Sohasta Padadibhiksa, means suppose you try to give a blow to your left hand with your right hand, who is going to bear the pain? Yourself. Like that, we cannot do harm to anybody. So this fundamental concept of the essential spiritual unity of humanity, not only humanity, whole creation. You cannot do harm to an ant or an insect or a fly and then say you are spiritual. You may be religious, but you cannot be spiritual. I mean, deliberately, we cannot harbor any feeling or emotions of animosity or hostility towards anybody. This idea, which you find in Shankaracharya's works, Swami Vivekananda interprets in 19th century, and he says this is the highest spiritual ethical philosophy, and that infinite oneness of the soul is the eternal sanction of all morality, all ethics, all good actions. Any other kind of morality, any other philosophy of morality has some problem. See, if I believe that my God is in very good terms with me, so I can do anything to people who don't believe in my God. That is not real ethics. I should look upon the whole humanity as the creation of the same God whom I worship. Then I cannot do or think of doing any harm to anybody in this world. That's why Vivekananda says Advaita or Vedanta, non-dualistic Vedanta, is the highest philosophy of ethics and morality that we can ever conceive of. So this is Vedanta's answer to the criticism that Vedanta philosophy is immoral, or rather it is not concerned with morality. That's a great criticism. Rather, Vedantic ethical philosophy, or an ethical philosophy based on Vedantic concept of human unity, is the only rational humanity, because there are many people who don't believe in a God. If you tell such a person, well, God will punish you if you do harm to somebody. Well, I won't care for God. You heard of Christopher Hitchens, the great humanist, atheist, agnostic, who passed away, of course, some years back. He was a great lover of humanity. He was a humanist. But he didn't believe in God or anything. Vedanta even accommodates such people within his fold. So even non-believers who refuse to accept God can become Vedantins, because if you lead a good life, if you are good, if you are noble, if you don't do harm to anybody, then God will accept you even if you do not accept Him. Because God looks upon humanity as His own creation. That's the Vedantic response to the criticism that Vedanta is immoral or it is indifferent towards morality. Rather, it is the highest universal, ethical, moral philosophy. The second criticism that you mostly find in many translations is the Vedantic concept, the non-dualistic concept of karma or action as only means but an end in itself. Now, there is a great verse in Shankaracharya's works. It comes in the, he wrote two small commentaries to Kena Upanishad, that is Vakya Bhashya and Pada Bhashya. It means two kinds of commentaries. There is an interesting statement, which is a very graphic statement. Nahi nadhyaha parago navam na munchadi yatheshtra desha gavanam pradi swadhantre sati. This is a very interesting statement, as I explain. Now, suppose you want to cross the river. You use a boat. You get into a boat and you cross the river. And once you reach the other bank, you don't carry the boat on your head. You leave the boat behind and you go ahead. Like that, we should work hard. We must work with great efficiency, with great professionalism, with very great skill and concentration. But remember, work is only a means it is not an end. You need not go to Vedanta philosophy to understand this. There are people who have piled up billions of dollars, and later they find they have a big problem, cancer. So suddenly I worked all this, and what am I going to do with this money? There are people who work hard, very efficient, very professional, but have to take pills, sleeping pills every night. If work can bring real happiness and joy, then you do not have to take pills for getting 4 hours sleep. So Shankaracharya says, work is necessary. Efficiency, work, skill, all these are necessary. But remember, work is a means, an instrument to reach a goal. It should not be an end in itself. If you look at the history of the world, you find if you go to hospitals, if you go to psychiatric clinics, if you go to crematoriums, if you go to old care homes, you find, and you ask them, do you think work is all that you have? They will say no. But you should not wait till you reach an old care home to realize this truth. So Shankaracharya says, work is like a boat. Nadyaha parago navam namunchadi yatheshta desha gamanam prati swatantriya sati. The meaning is this. If you want to cross the river, you get into a boat and you reach the other bank. After reaching the other bank, you are free. That yatheshta desha gamanam prati swatantriya means you are free to go in whichever direction, whatever direction you want to, because you reach the other bank. Then you don't carry the boat in your head. You go ahead. Like that, work, efficiency, skill, professionalism, all are very good, necessary and useful, but they are not complete in themselves. They cannot they cannot answer some of the questions that we may start asking to ourselves when we get old, when we become successful, when we become rich and powerful and successful. And then again, mind may ask the question, well, what's the meaning of life? What's the meaning of death? What's the meaning of existence? Is the meaning of life only making money? That question is answered in this matter of some time. So he says, those who realize the truth, that life has got a higher meaning, a higher relevance, a higher goal, higher than just working 24 hours, making wealth and money. They say, those who think that their life has got a higher meaning, they do not consider work itself as complete in itself or perfect in itself. So, Atmavidaha Samyik Darshana Viruddho Mithyajnana Hetukaha Karmayogaha Swapne Api Sambhavaidum Shakya. The meaning is this: those who are highly evolved, those who have got their eyes on a higher spiritual goal, to realize God, to lead a spiritual life, they do not look upon work and empirical pleasures that the work brings to us as an end in itself. That's the meaning of the statement. You know, there is a reason why Shankaracharya makes a strong statements. Because when he was born in 8th century, Vedic culture, Vedantic culture was going through a very critical period. Just as it was going through a very crucial critical period when Sri Ramakrishna and Vivekananda were born in 19th century. In 8th century, people thought that the only purpose of religious life was to conduct some external rituals, elaborate Vedic rituals. Remember, Buddha in 6th century BC revolted against the same trend. and then Buddha brought about a new spiritual revolution in Vedantic tradition. But Buddha's influence had slowly disappeared by 8th century AD. So the time had come for a reinterpretation, for a new spiritual revolution. Remember, revolution is a bad word in politics and in sociology, but spiritual revolution has got a higher meaning. Spiritual revolution, in a way, means reinterpreting, giving a new, positive, relevant interpretation to ancient scriptures. For example, in that sense, one could say Jesus was a revolutionary, spiritual revolutionary, because he brought a new spiritual revolution by his life, by his sacrifices, by his teachings, and by his crucifixion, by the transition from historical Jesus to universal Jesus. Like that, Buddha was a spiritual revolutionary. Buddha led a spiritual revolution against the mechanical ritualism of his time. So also Shankaracharya was a spiritual revolutionary. What Buddha did in 6th century, Shankaracharya had to do in 8th century on a much bigger scale. And Vivekananda and Sri Ramakrishna in 19th century also were spiritual revolutionaries, because Vedantic tradition had already taken a back seat, and it was in need of a new interpretation. So Sri Ramakrishna and Vivekananda gave a new interpretation of the ancient Vedantic tradition in a language and style intelligible to the modern times, to an age in which science, technology, and globalization had already started dominating. So the reason why Shankaracharya gave this new concept of karma or action is this. There are statements in Vedic literature which had become very prominent during Shankaracharya's time. See, Pashyema Sharadasadam, Jivema Sharadasadam, Sunayama Sharadasadam, Prabhruyama Sharadasadam, like that. Means, literal meaning is this. In those days, people used to perform Vedic rituals. And do you know what they used to pray for? For 100 years. Wealth, progeny, empirical prosperity, material prosperity. That was what people were praying for when Shankaracharya was born. And they considered these rituals, which used to be called karma, action at that time, as the only purpose of Vedic culture, Vedantic culture. That was a very serious, very tragic downfall which had happened in Vedantic tradition when Shankaracharya was born. So, action or karma was interpreted in those days just as mechanical rituals. Those who are not familiar with the history of Indian philosophy may find it slightly bit difficult to grasp this, but I can explain this. Vedic literature contains the highest philosophical ideas and also references to mechanical rituals, prayers for material prosperity, and prayers for spiritual realization. So all these are found in Vedic literature. So when Shankaracharya was born, people had started interpreting Vedanta as a kind of ritualism, praying for material prosperity, nothing else. That was the sad state of affairs when Shankaracharya was born. So he emphatically stated, this action, this karma, this mechanical ritual cannot take you to the highest spiritual goal. It may help you to get material prosperity, but nothing beyond that. So he strongly criticized this mechanical ritualism. So he says, karma and spiritual realization, they are mutually opposed to each other. That's an important statement in Shankaracharya's book. So when you read it, when you read the translation, we may not fully grasp the implication. See, friends, Jnana karmanor virodham parvatavat akampyam. It's a statement in the commentary on the Ishavasya Upanishad. This is a statement in Shankaracharya's books. Jnana karmano virodham parvatavat akampyam. Literally it means that the mutual opposition, the contradiction between mechanical ritualism, that means praying for material prosperity, praying for money and wealth, and the highest spiritual enlightenment. They are not compactive when they are opposed to each other. If you only pray for material prosperity, you cannot reach the highest spiritual realization. If you emphasize the highest spiritual realization, then you won't be praying exclusively for material prosperity. In 8th century. But in 19th century, when Vivekananda gave a new interpretation to Vedanta, you find Swami Vivekananda completely takes a new stand. So very often, when you read Swami Vivekananda's complete works, you find certain ideas. For example, Swamiji says, we all can reach the highest spiritual goal, either through Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, or Raj Yoga, through the path of action, through the path of knowledge, through the path of psychic control, and also through the path of devotion. Now, Swami Vivekananda gave a new revolutionary interpretation to karma, action in 19th century. The reason was the social conditions of 19th century were totally different from the social conditions of 8th century. So, if you look at the evolution of Vedanta philosophy, it runs into 2,400 years of successive evolution. From Buddha's time, from 6th century BC to 19th century. In between, Shankaracharya stands. So Buddha in 6th century BC AD and Vivekananda and Ramakrishna Paramahamsa in 19th century AD. Total 24 centuries. Of course, Vedanta philosophy is much more ancient. It had already become ancient when Buddha was born. But we are talking about the historical evolution of Vedantic heritage. So in Buddha's time, there was a need for a revolution against the mechanical ritualism. And as a result, Buddha interpreted Vedanta in terms of 4 noble truths and 8 noble paths. Buddha's 8 noble paths constitute the path to liberation or nirvana. Ajiva and Sammik Vyayama. These are the 3 of the 8-fold paths, Ashtangika Yoga. So these 3 parts, these 3 elements of Ashtanga Yoga means proper action, proper context, and proper way of leading our life through proper action. All these together constitute Sammik Vyayama, Sammik Karma, Sammik Ajiva. You find, I'm not going to those details. So Buddha gave a new rational interpretation in 6th century BC. But again, after 1200 years, Buddha's teachings had completely vanished. They had been highly distorted. So a new spiritual revolution was necessary in 8th century AD, and Shankaracharya led a revolt against the distorted, the misrepresentations of Vedanta philosophy. In 19th century, on the other hand, Vivekananda lived in modern times. That was the time, as I mentioned earlier, when religion itself was facing a great challenge. The exclusive claims of many of the established religions were facing serious opposition from enlightened people. As I mentioned, evolutionists, Darwinists, Radical humanists were influenced by the teachings of Marx and Engels, and also by the positivists. Many of them refused to fully accept the theological claims of Augustine and Aquinas. Though they were fully respectful towards the mystical tradition of Christianity, they were not fully ready to accept the theological legacy of hermeneutics. So Vivekananda came at a time when he had to give an answer to the radical humanists, the evolutionists, and also positivists. So he said, every action can be called karma. Shankaracharya said, of course, during that time, that was the common concept in those days. Only mechanical ritual was called a karma. Today, use the English word karma. This karma has gone through thousands of years of evolution. Today, we use karma in many strange, funny means. If you don't get a parking place, it's usually use karma. If you get it, then also it is karma. So the word karma, unfortunately, has gone through many strange connotations. That means evolution of its meaning is very strange. But the word karma itself has gone through a different line of evolution in Vedantic tradition. During Shankaracharya's time, the word karma was used only to denote mechanical rituals. Mechanical rituals performed with prayers to different deities, gods and goddesses for material pleasure. Pashyema Sharadasatam, Jivema Sharadasatam, these are mantras, sacred hymns from Vedic literature, which they used to utter and offer ghee and everything on fire. In those days, not now. Now also it, of course, in some places in India. But 19th century, Swami Vivekananda gave a more rational, a more broad-based and more scientific interpretation to the word karma. Every action, every word, every thought, every idea, even a flash of idea in your mind can be called karma. If you can spiritualize this karma, whatever you do, you work for others, if you are driving, if you are cooking, if you are working in a factory or a university, whatever you may do, all these actions can be spiritualized, can be given a spiritual orientation. So, the line of demarcation between the spiritual and secular vanishes. Every secular activity can be spiritualized. That was the new radical revolutionary interpretation that Vivekananda gave in 19th century. In fact, this interpretation is found in Gita itself, which was unfortunately forgotten by the time Buddha was born. In Gita there is a statement, Brahmanya adhaya karmani sangham tiktva karoti ekha lipide nasapapena patma patram ivam bhasa. Pasyan, srunan, when you are seeing something, when you are eating food, when you are working, all these, if you can do as an offering to God, then all these actions cease to be actions, they become different forms of worship. That was the revolutionary interpretation that Vivekananda brought back in 19th century. So what Lord Krishna taught in the 4th millennium BC, which was forgotten by the time Buddha was born, which was completely forgotten by the time Shankaracharya was born, was brought back into relevance and practical utility by Vivekananda. That's why in Vivekananda's works you find every action can cease to be an action. It can become a form of worship. So, that's why there is a statement in Vivekananda. What he says is, the human mind is the Taj Mahal of temples. Therefore, the greatest act of worship is the service done to your next door neighbor. The human heart is the Taj Mahal of temples. Taj Mahal is, is a metaphor for a beautiful architecture. I don't know how beautiful it could be. After all, it's a place where dead bodies are buried. But still, from an external architectural point of view, it is a symbol of external beauty. So Vivekananda says that human heart is the Taj Mahal of temples, which means the most beautiful temple is, or the most beautiful place of worship is the human heart. Human heart is also the permanent residential address of God. So he says, so every act of service that we do to our next door neighbor is an act of worship. So in this sense, karma becomes a spiritual practice, like prayer and meditation. So you find a tradition of successive teachers coming from time to time, giving new interpretation to new and giving new relevance. That's why Vivekananda's greatest contribution to Vedanta philosophy is the concept of practical Vedanta. Universal religion already exists in the core of Advaitic ideal. But practical Vedanta was really a unique and original contribution to Vedanta philosophy. I would say, when you use the word original, Swami Vivekananda won't agree with you, because Swamiji says everywhere, he says, I have not preached anything but the Upanishads. Swamiji says. He never claimed originality, that is his greatness. But if you look at his works, you find he gives an original approach. The idea may not be original, but the approach is certainly original. I mean, a new original approach to Vedanta. So he called practical Vedanta. So Vedanta has got the highest spiritual ideal, which he called universal religion, which teaches that the truth, God, lives in the hearts of everything and everybody in the world. Humanity as creation is one spiritual entity. Humanity is one spiritual family. So, and every religion is equally valid as a path leading to the highest spiritual goal. If you are sincere, if you are honest, if you are pure, every religion will take you to God. Differences and different views are only with regard to the means. The goal is the same. All these ideas Swami Vivekananda took from the Upanishads, and he formed the concept of universal religion. But this universal religion has got a practical dimension in this age of modern science and technology. And we know when Vivekananda lived, the world had already started becoming one. The barriers between nations and cultures were slowly disappearing. The world had already started becoming one. In fact, the beginnings of globalization could be traced to the mid-19th century, when communication and facilities for transportation and technological devices for mutual communication among cultures and nations and societies and individuals all had started revolutionizing life on this planet. So, Swami Vivekananda found this Vedanta should be taken out of the Indian subcontinent or the context of Indian subcontinent, and should be brought to the world stage. So he interpreted this as a universal religion, and in its practical aspect he said, any person belonging to any religion or belonging to no religion, even an agnostic, can become spiritual. So the very definitions of religion underwent a radical change. You can be spiritual even without being religious. This idea historically can be traced to the lectures of Swami Vivekananda. There is a statement which I partly quoted earlier. You live your life in such a way that God will accept you even if you do not accept Him. Now, such a definition can accommodate Richard Dawkins or Karl Marx or Christopher Hitchens into the fold of spirituality. You need not believe in God. You lead a good life. Be a good human being, broad-minded, pure, noble, unselfish. You are spiritual. God's ontological existence is not dependent upon your recognition of His existence. That will make Him very miserable. Rather, God is one all-pervading reality. And this spiritual life can be practiced by anybody, in any profession, in any tradition, by giving a spiritual orientation to whatever we do, with words, deed, or mind, or thoughts, whatever may be. And that's why he coined this new expression, Atmano Mokshartham Jigathitaya. Atmano Mokshartham means for one's own spiritual liberation, enlightenment, realization. The idea was already there, but for the good of the world. So all these ideas, which are already there in the Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita, were given a new orientation, new interpretation by Swami Vivekananda. In fact, every action, when done as a worship, takes us one step nearer to God, to a spiritual goal, and also it's a service to people living around us, or it's a service to the world at large, Jagathita. So, on the one hand, our spiritual evolution, our spiritual progress begins to happen at the subjective level. The objective level, the world also will be benefited. So, you find a royal path of spiritual evolution right from Buddha to Sri Ramakrishna Vivekananda. So, we will continue this discussion in the coming series. So, I'm trying to focus on certain important aspects of Vedanta philosophy. So, thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Now we have announcements. The subject for next Sunday is the possibility of perfection. This talk will be given by Swami Vedanta. Child care is provided during our Sunday lectures. On Wednesday evenings, we have vespers with meditation at 7:30 p.m. On Friday evenings, a scripture class is held in Vivekananda Hall at 7:30 p.m. The topic for study is Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. On Sundays, all are welcome to use the library from 12:30 to 2:30 p.m. You and your friends are cordially invited to attend all of these services. As usual, after the lecture, there will be a question and answer session in Vivekananda Hall, and all are welcome. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.